May 25th, 1979, Cincinnati, Ohio. A man named David Booth wakes up in a cold sweat for the 10th night in a row. The nightmare that's been haunting him is always the same. A commercial airliner taking off, then suddenly rolling to the left and crashing in a massive fireball. David Booth knows these dreams are different. They don't feel like dreams. They feel like warnings. David Booth is an office manager in Cincinnati and has never experienced anything like this before. The dreams are so vivid and detailed that David can't shake the feeling that what he's seeing might actually happen. Why does he have these strange dreams? And what is the meaning behind them? On May 22nd, after enduring these nightmares for a week, David decided to act and call the FAA office in Boston.
Hello, my name is David Booth. I know this sounds crazy, but I've been having this dream about a plane crash for the last week or so, and it feels real. I don't know how to explain it, but it almost feels like the dream is trying to warn me.
On the other side of the phone was Paul Williams. Paul listened politely and asked David what kind of plane he saw in his dreams. David was no expert and could only tell Paul that it was an American Airlines plane. After some back and forth, they came to the conclusion that the plane David saw in his dreams was likely a McDonnell Douglas DC-10. The DC-10s had been the subject of controversy in the past. Just a few years earlier, one of its cargo doors had blown off mid-flight, causing an explosive decompression and a near catastrophe. What no one knew, however, was that a new problem was developing, one that wouldn't be discovered until it was too late. David later also spoke to Jack Parker, the FAA's public affairs director. Jack Parker was unnerved by what David told him. He didn't sound like a conspiracy theorist or someone chasing attention. He sounded genuinely concerned. Something about this felt strange. Because David didn't see the specific plane number in his dreams, the FAA didn't do much, and overall had no reason to believe that any of the planes would cause problems. Without a flight number, airline schedule, or even a departure city, David's dream offered no concrete data. As a result, the FAA documented the report, but took no further action. That night, David went to bed with a growing sense of dread. He had the dream again, but this time, it felt different, stronger, sharper, closer, like time was running out. On the morning of May 25th, 1979, David woke up from the nightmare one more time. The dream had never been this intense before. David already called the FAA, but they didn't do anything about his concerns. He felt helpless. That very day, American Airlines Flight 191, which was a DC-10, was being prepared for takeoff at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, heading to Los Angeles. At 2:50 p.m., the passengers boarded the plane. It was a day like any other. Travelers, business people, and families boarded different planes, eagerly awaiting their destinations. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. In command was Captain Walter Lux, with James Dillard as first officer and Alfred Udovich as flight engineer. Lux had more than 20,000 hours of flight experience. All three men were seasoned professionals, and neither the passengers nor the crew had any reason to suspect that this would be anything but an ordinary flight. At 3:02 p.m., the RC-10 entered the runway and got clearance for takeoff. And just as the plane lifted off the ground, disaster struck. The left engine and pylon assembly completely separated from the wing with a loud bang, severing hydraulic lines and damaging the wing's leading edge. The plane rolled sharply to the left, exactly as David had described in his dreams. Captain Walter Lux and his crew fought desperately to regain control, but the damage was too severe. Just 31 seconds after liftoff, American Airlines Flight 191 crashed into an open field near a trailer park, erupting into a massive explosion. Firefighters and emergency responders immediately rushed to the scene, but to no prevail. All 271 people on board and 2 people on the ground lost their lives instantly. When David heard the news that evening, he collapsed in his living room. His worst fears had come true. The nightmare he'd been trying to warn others about for weeks had become reality. The crash of Flight 191 wasn't just a tragedy. It was a failure on multiple levels. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board quickly arrived on the crash site, sifting through the wreckage to determine what had gone wrong. And what they discovered was shocking. The left engine and pylon had separated from the wing not because of some unforeseen catastrophic failure, but because of improper maintenance procedures. American Airlines, in an effort to save time and money, had been removing and reinstalling engines and pylons as a single unit rather than separately as the manufacturer had specified. This shortcut had caused microscopic cracks to develop in the pylon structure. Over time, these cracks grew larger until finally, on that fateful day, the entire assembly failed catastrophically during takeoff. But the maintenance shortcut wasn't the only problem in this story. The plane's warning systems failed to alert the pilots to the loss of hydraulic fluid, leaving them unaware of the severity of their situation until it was too late. And then there was the FAA, the very agency David had desperately tried to warn. They had allowed American Airlines to use the improper maintenance procedure without thoroughly evaluating its safety implications. For David Booth, the aftermath was a mix of vindication and devastation. He couldn't help but wonder, if he had done anything differently, could 273 lives have been saved? In the days that followed the crash, after the wreckage was cleared and investigators had left, something strange began to happen. Residents near the crash site reported flickering lights, hovering silently above the field before vanishing without a sound. Others swore they heard cries, metal twisting, and explosions long after the site had gone quiet. The sounds would come suddenly, and then disappear into the night. Local dogs who were normally calm began barking wildly when passing the field, their eyes fixed on seemingly nothing. Even the most docile pets turned anxious and agitated, refusing to go any closer. Then came the knocks. Homeowners were woken in the middle of the night by violent knocking at their doors. But when they opened them, there was no one there. But the strangest report of all came from a man walking his dog one evening. He noticed a figure approaching. A young man, disoriented, his clothes scorched, his body smelling of jet fuel. Smoke curled from his jacket as if he had just escaped a fire. The man calmly asked for the nearest phone. Startled, the dog walker pointed toward a nearby gas station. But when he turned around to say more, the figure was gone. Whether these sightings were hallucinations, manifestations of trauma, or something else entirely, they were never explained. And when you remember David Booth's dreams, the warnings he gave, the precision of what he foresaw, the events take on a different tone. Something unusual was happening. The FAA decided to forward David's written testimony and recordings to the Institute of Parapsychology in North Carolina. If anyone could explain it, they could. But even they were baffled. They reviewed his case, they studied the timelines, and in the end, they had no answers. After May 25, 1979, David Booth's dreams stopped. He never experienced anything like this again. Many sued American Airlines and the manufacturer of the DC-10, resulting in one of the largest settlements in aviation history at the time, which was $500,000. Flight 191 reminds us that in matters of safety, it's better to investigate and be wrong than to dismiss and be tragically right. And in the case of David Booth, it leaves us wondering, what if someone had listened?